Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GL 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people they may gather in one place, this meeting of the Medfield Warrant Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. As a reminder, persons who would like to listen to or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and the meeting notice. And we are being recorded, and we'll do a quick roll call. I am Sharon Tatro. Ed
Vozzella.
Newton.
I am Newton Thompson.
Kristine.
Christine Barton.
Amanda.
Amanda Hall.
Bob Siney. I always do.
Bob Siney.
I always want to call you both names. Jeremy.
I'll answer to either one.
Yes.
Okay.
No, we're not
All right.
skipping those. Thank you, Mr. Linehan. I skipped.
All right. So, what we were going to, I know Kristine sent a bunch of different things today. I'll tell you kind of my grand plan, and which gets us to not meeting on next Wednesday, is that I'd like to get through as many warrant articles as we can. We are not going to be able to vote on the operating budget itself tonight, but I think that we probably can be comfortable enough to vote on the articles that have to do with money now. And then I think the plan is, if we need to, maybe just start a half an hour early next Thursday, if people can do that and we can vote, or we can decide we're okay with being to be heard next Thursday, because we went through the printing schedule, and if we just meet next Thursday for the warrant hearing and then we meet the following Monday the 5th, we can still meet the printing deadline. So if there happens to be things that we end up being to be heard on Thursday, but think we could actually vote but run out of time or don't have enough information, we could potentially do that on the 5th and make the printing deadline. And then that way we all only have to meet for the warrant hearing next week, if that works for people. So with that being said, Kristine and Nick, what do you want to do? I know you sent me my list of things to not forget. Do we want to go down that, or do you want to?
I think it makes the most sense to go down that list.
Okay. So I don't know if anybody else had the pleasure of watching the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, but Kristine did go through the kind of proposal spreadsheet that we had up on Monday with my lovely purple column. And I think the basic decision they made, if you want to call it a decision, because they didn't vote either, was that they understood that we could use free cash, whether it be 420 or 350. I think they would prefer if we could cut it down closer to the 350. They would not like to use the free cash. They would prefer to use stimulus if they are allowed to. And a decent amount of that discussion had to do with, if we use the free cash and then say we want to do extra stabilization, we can meet that reserve policy that is the 7.5%, but we're not meeting the 9%, because the rule is we would like it to be between 9 and 12%, but we'll settle for no less than 7.5. Gus's argument was, if we have the money, shouldn't we be shooting for 9? And I don't have that sheet up, but don't we get to like 8 point something if?
Yeah, 8.37.
Yeah, so we're not that far off of the 9. So, which is why I say, I think even though we can't vote on the entire operating budget slate, I do think that we could probably feel comfortable voting on the warrant articles that have to do with money, because I think if they all passed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristine, if every single one of them passed, then we're at the 420, right? Because your 420 assumes every single one passed.
Mhm.
So if there are ones that do not pass, we just are going down closer to the 350.
Right.
So we won't go through, which is why like we're not going to go through every like we're not going to go like specifically through like police and fire, like all of those different line items, because we can't yet, because that's part of the reason why we don't have the operating budget today, because the financial team is still working on splitting all the COLAs out properly. So each line item isn't exact. We know that we're kind of at the 420, but it's not exact. But I do think we feel comfortable at least going through the articles. So they did remove Article 7. The school committee passed it. Is that video available yet? I looked the other night and I haven't.
I don't know. Let me check on that.
I popped in only for the vote. It passed, and then the selectmen passed it as well. So Article 7 ship has sailed. So that works into our formulas. So
Can you highlight the articles that we've removed so we can talk about getting that number down.
well, right. Well, so I guess then my question is, do we want to just go down the articles like one by one to see which ones we can do? We'll just kind of start at the top, because then we will eventually hit. I think the only discussion that has to do with money that we need to have that's not a specific warrant article is probably the public health nurse.
And capital.
That's a warrant article, though.
Sorry, warrant article. I thought I heard you the other way. Sorry.
Well, so I'm just thinking, if we go,
Yeah, I'd like to go through the list, just start from one and go through.
we'll just
and then
go
we'll
from
know
one all the
exactly
way
where we are.
down, and then we
Sure.
can do the public health nurse when we're at the bottom of the list. How's
You can
that?
see where we are by going through. That's what I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, all right. I had my trusty spreadsheet that I was trying to renumber, but I ran out of time. But I can do that on the fly because I did get a decent amount of the way through. All right. So, does everyone have their trusty warrant articles that Kristine sent out? All right. So number one, we already voted on March 8th, so we're good. Same thing with Article 2. Same thing with Article 3. Same thing with Article 4 and 5. Number 6 is still the personal administration plan, which we
Sharon,
cannot.
I thought on
sorry.
4, we had to wait for the dollars. Did we vote on that? I thought on number 4, on the PEG, we had to wait for the amount. No?
I think that we did it as a sum of funds.
Right, we did. Okay.
We leave it open-ended so that we can count all of the money that's up until the town meeting when we do the motion.
Capiche.
Okie dokie. Personal administration plan, I've been told by the town administrator that we're not allowed to vote on that one tonight.
Vote on it tonight because I still haven't gotten a full copy of it for Jeremy to review. So we're in the process. So just to go back just for 1 second, those are a couple of things that are all tied together that are holding us up, giving you the line item budget tonight. That's incorporating the 2% COLA, updating the personnel plan so you can vote on those. So that's why we're held up.
Okay.
Everybody gave us a draft, but we want to be able to go through all of that and make sure, because we don't want to have any corrections before the hearing next week.
Capiche.
So, yes, hold on.
That's
Hold on.
acceptable.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Just, I'd rephrase it. It wasn't a total failure. Just saying.
Listen, I gave you a very hopeful task. It's okay. You got 99.9% there.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay.
All right.
All right. And you might have been busy at a few other meetings, so you get a pass. It might be a pandemic that you're trying to be a town administrator in. Again, I'll give you that. Okay. All right. And her son also had his senior night at soccer, which she multitasked at.
I did.
And it was a cute picture. Okay. I digress. All right. So the operating budget we're going to skip, which I think is the long-winded way. Article 7 is still the operating budget, correct?
Article 7 is now the operating budget. Yes.
Okay. Yes. All right. So Article 8 was municipal stabilization that we already passed on the 8th. Same thing with Article 9, which was the Dale Street reimbursement. So that brings us to capital. So there is a new capital article. The Capital Budget Committee met on Tuesday morning. And try to explain to you basically what was decided. So there was a kind of like a long discussion about what Jeremy had kind of posed at the meeting about the question of, do we have too many leases given the current situation? And so the Capital Budget Committee met and decided to draw a line at $150,000. So if something is $150,000 or above and it has the ability to be leased or bonded, we should consider that. Below that, we should be purchasing. So when you apply that rule, remember the first version of this was $707 odd thousand. It is now, what's the total? I was looking for that. I don't have the total. It's like 1 million.
Oh, the grand total for everything on that page?
Yeah,
Was
the
it a
grand total of
million?
everything on Article 11. Nick, do you know that number?
1,946,000, I think.
There you go. That sounds
340.
good.
I added them up.
There you go. Thanks, Ed. Yes, it was just
326.
It was just under 1.1 million. So the theory is that even though we don't know for sure what the stimulus, what are we calling it, ARP or ARPA?
People are calling it ARPA, which is so
ARPA?
horrible. CARES was so bad.
I feel like if we say ARPA, I need to be like pretending I'm at like a fiesta and I need a fun hat or something.
I say ARPA, but then when it was ARP, I kept saying AARP. So either way,
Okay.
I would have renamed this something better. But
Either way, we have $1.28 million coming to the town that we do not know exactly what we can use it for, but I think that there is a lot of confidence that these types of expenses will be approved. So they are, or I guess the committee is suggesting that we use $750,000 from free cash, which was the number we were at before, because originally we were going to take 750 but only spend 707. Now we're going to take 750 and spend 750, and then suggest. Oh, sorry, 751. Sorry, yes, because we needed those extra dollars. Yes.
Yeah.
So 751 in free cash and 400,000 of stimulus, hopefully. Kristine, do you want to explain the concern to the Plan B if we can't?
So I think what the issue is, this will go forward in the warrant report as you're seeing it this evening. And in our write-up, we will talk about what the alternative plan would be if we did not, we're anticipating we're going to receive the guidance from Treasury before town meeting. So, but probably after this warrant report goes to print. So we will have a discussion of what we will do if we aren't allowed to use that ARPA money for these capital items. And then we may amend the motion of how we're funding the article as we get closer to town meeting. I think that's probably the easiest 30,000 foot view of that. Does that make sense?
I just commented, it looks like the American Rescue Plan Act stimulus funding, I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Those items were in the original 750-ish or something, and they came out and are funded in the stimulus, and that allowed you to buy more as opposed to lease more of the remaining amounts in the capital stabilization fund.
That's right.
Okay.
It's the exact same list. They're just bought differently.
Yes.
Right.
So Plan B would be go back to financing.
I think there's ongoing discussions of what the Plan B would be, and we will try to outline those as we go forward. But right now, we would like to go forward with this plan. If we have to change that based on the stimulus funding or basically based on the stimulus funding, if we have to change that, we would call a meeting of the Warrant Committee to have that discussion, as well as the Capital Budget Committee, to make sure the motion, so the motion can change the article, but it won't exceed the scope of the existing article.
Thank you.
Yeah. Justin?
Yeah, so this, this windfall is great in that we can move on purchasing and rather than leasing and really fill in pretty quickly a number of the capital items, especially the vehicles. But it will have the effect of having very similar age vehicles for like the police fleet. So I presume now if there is the capital stabilization fund for these purchases going forward, there's a more predictable source of funding. So we'll be able to, in the future, when the cycle for that fleet comes up for replacement, we'll be able to stagger them more. We won't have to buy all 6 cruisers in the same year.
Right.
Some will be kept longer.
Mhm.
And
Right.
and
Some
cycle
are
through.
going to have to stretch. Yeah. Some of them are going to have to
Yep.
stretch longer because I think her long-term plan is 2 a year.
I think 2
That would
years.
seem about right. And
Yeah.
if you,
That was
If
my-
I
it means
remember,
you're gonna have to stretch some longer and just kind of
Right.
work into a more sustainable replacement plan for those
Exactly.
vehicles and for other vehicles as well.
And that used to be our replacement schedule for police vehicles was 2 a year. And I think we continued that, probably through the mid 2000s. And then we, obviously when money got a little tighter around the 2008, we dropped off that, which is resulting in all of this now, but we've gone through that before.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we need to get on a predictable replacement schedule for all of them so that this doesn't continue to happen.
And I don't know if it requires any attention when we go through the articles, but there was a question from one of the select board members about why we wouldn't just continue to lease because of interest rates and what have you. So, I don't know if we need to address that or if we just make because I think the position on the Warrant Committee is that if we can purchase, it's desirable. It's preferable.
Yeah, and I think
At least at this amount cut off. I'm just saying I sat through the meeting and that's what I heard.
Yeah, Gus did say that.
Well, and I think part of that is when we started making those plans for this budget, we started in December and the market looked a lot different back in December when we were quoted, 0.5%. And now we know, I think Nick updated the selectmen on Tuesday that there was a 20-year borrowing already at 2%. So that market is changing quicker than we had hoped, but that's what happens when you plan the budget 5 months in advance. So
Yeah, but it's also a change in circumstance because we were trying to justify leasing because we needed to get these pieces of equipment on board. I don't think anybody was that enamored with the leasing concept, other than the fact that it allowed.
It was out of desperation, really.
Right. It was to get stuff into the door that we needed. Right.
well, and
Yeah.
I think like Jeremy just said, it's trying to get us, in 2 to 3 years where we need to be on that replacement schedule so we don't have, $1.5 million of capital to be replaced every year. So.
Couldn't agree more.
The other thing I'll add is if you look at what's on the list for next year already, the most expensive item other than school IT would be continued investment in the roads at 130,000. Everything else is less than 60,000. So there wouldn't be any real need to look at financing next year. So do some this year and then at least skip next year at where things stand right now.
And I think
Agreed, Nick. And to build on that, that roadway funding is likely to increase in value in the future. As vehicles come off, you're going to probably see need in some of the other infrastructure like roads and sidewalks. So, there's plenty to do going forward, and it's not all rolling fleet. There's other types of capital.
I think Selectman Marcucci was talking about that at capital budget that we're anticipating next year to incorporate the sidewalk plan into our 5-year plan as well. And then there was something else I was just going to tell you. Now I forgot what it was. Sorry.
You're fading a little bit, Kristine. What did Mike say about incorporating?
By next year, we'll start to incorporate the sidewalk plan that Mo has been working on.
Gotcha.
Sidewalks for everyone. Slowly. Very slowly. Okay, so the computer keeps shutting down here. So this is broken into across 3 articles. So the first article is establishing the capital and debt stabilization fund with a transfer from free cash. And then I think the way that you wrote this, what is the unexpended special articles?
We're going
Thing.
through, there are some unexpended special articles that people have been holding onto in departments for different projects that finished, but the money, there's still a small balance in there that needs to be closed out. I think it's probably around $60,000, but we just need to go through and make.
Hey, we get a police car with that.
Yeah,
We need
can't,
to make sure that that they are in fact closed out and we aren't waiting for any other projects on that. So we would take that, especially now that, as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of the old way we did capital. So any of those projects need to be reconsidered and be part of this plan if they haven't been expended. So we would take that and incorporate that into this new capital stabilization fund.
but can't you use an unexpended balance for a purchase of another asset similar to what the original request was?
You could, but that's more in terms of bonding. We usually take the unexpended capital articles and just put them back into the capital article. This time we'd actually transfer it into capital stabilization fund since we're creating it.
And they're usually relatively small balances.
Yeah.
So you
Right.
kind of cobble a lot together.
Okay. Do people feel comfortable voting on Article 10 then to create the capital stabilization fund with free cash plus unexpended special articles?
But you're gonna change the 750 to 751?
That needs to
Oh,
be.
sorry, 751. Yes, she'll change it to 751. See, this is what threw me off.
750, 686.
That darn, like, who knows what. It wasn't an even number. I'm sure it's one of those lease payments. It wasn't an even number. Okay.
Yes.
Would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve Article 10 as presented.
Okay, is there a
At
second?
7:51, right?
At 751, yes.
Yeah.
Second.
Second,
Second. Yeah.
All right. Ed,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Kristine,
yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Okay, Article 10. All right, so then Article 11 is the specific list of purchases and leases, which add up to that million plus number. Is there a motion about Article 11?
I guess. So that's gonna be the 750 plus the.
Right, it's the
750
751 plus
the
400.
388.
It's on this,
Oh
yeah.
boy, you gotta do 400, okay.
Yeah, plus 400.
We won't put the sum of money in here until we do the motion.
Right,
So we'll list we'll list each item in the capital budget, what the recommended amount and the recommended source is. But then depending on that stimulus, the motion will track how we're going to fund all of that, just in case there's an issue. But honestly, if we can't spend stimulus on capital, what are we going to spend it
exactly,
on? Right?
exactly. Yeah.
So just to be clear, is the sum of money the entire list, the total of the
It'll
list
be-
of 1.946 million?
It'll be the entire list, correct?
Okay.
And then the last, well, there's like some items on this list aren't funded from
Correct.
the free
Right.
cash and the great, because they're from revolving funds, which is what
Right.
it lists those things all the way over onto the
Right.
Which
side.
is why if you look at the motions we had last year, the motion will outline exactly where each funding source is coming from.
Oh, and I also want to point out, on the second page, ambulance 2, you may remember ambulance 2 was also a lease. Ambulance 2 is $300,000. We are actually not going to need to lease it because there is enough money in the ambulance revolving fund to buy it out, right?
Wow.
That's great.
That's
So
great.
even though it's over 150, it's not going to be a lease anymore.
Could you just state the overall amount again? I heard like 1.9 million, but I thought it was like 1.1-ish.
The list totals to 1,946,326.
That
And-
includes the revolving funds.
Correct.
Right.
That's revolving.
Capital stabilization is 750,686. Stimulus is 388,000. Parks and Recs is 82,640. ALS is 300,000. Water and sewer, 425,000.
Thank you.
Thanks, Newton.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have any more questions before we vote on Article 11? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion on Article 11?
Move to pass Article 11 as written.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Jeremy,
Yes.
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Kristine,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. I feel like we've already passed more articles tonight than we have in weeks.
Personally.
Okay, and then Article 12 is in order to be able to lease the ones over 150 minus the ambulances. We're not going to lease that one.
Yeah, right now, we don't have any vehicles to be leased. The other ones, I believe, are all borrowings. Right?
Right.
The two leases are the ones we did for last year. We'd like to keep this article in case, as an insurance policy, if the stimulus money doesn't come in, or if we need to change how this list is going to be funded, we'd like to keep that in there just in case.
I think the dump truck and the sidewalk tractor are leases,
Am I
aren't they?
missing?
They're going to be financed through issuing a bond, not
Yeah.
lease purchase. Just a
Oh,
different method
okay.
of financing since we're issuing debt for the water treatment plant.
So those don't fall under Article 12. We have nothing in Article 12. We're just
Right
keeping
now,
it just in case.
there's nothing for Article 12, but we're keeping it just in case we need it.
So should we vote on it just for? Okay.
Yeah, I think you can, no, I would do, you'll be heard at town meeting, because right
Okay.
now you don't know.
Because
what-
it doesn't. There's nothing in there at the
And-
moment.
And honestly, if we get to town meeting,
Okay.
and there's nothing that needs to be on there, we will put it on the consent calendar for dismissal. So it won't even need to come up.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. To be heard.
Be heard.
Mixing it up. All right. So Article 13 we did last week. That was the water treatment plant.
Mhm.
We are going to skip over the water and sewer operating, right? We're not ready to do that, Kristine.
No, that's the same issue as the regular operating and the personnel plan. We're just waiting for the 2% double check.
Okay. All righty. So we'll skip that. Right now, this is where I did not get caught up as to which one. So 16 is, so no, so 15. 15 is now the DOT ride sharing, which we already passed.
Mhm.
Okay, 16 is this the town garage solar?
Yeah, so
Now?
16, 17, 18, and 19 all relate to authorizations of the Board of Selectmen for solar energy systems. And I am going to yield the floor to Mr. Milano.
All righty, go Nick.
That's why they pay you the big bucks, Nick. And then if maybe they could, and I don't know if we want to, you can group them together, I think at least in categories, right? And then we can talk about if there's, any nuances in the individual ones. And then we can treat 19 separately, because that's a separate issue, right? So 16, 17, and 18, I think, in terms of, maybe you can characterize those, please.
Sure. So 16, 17 are both to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter leases with solar developers. 16 is for the town landfill. We are looking for the Board of Selectmen's authorization to lease that for the purposes of constructing a potential solar array at the town landfill. Article 17 is for the town garage roof and any accessory structures or any equipment that might be needed on the area, again, for potential solar project. And then Article 18 is to authorize the Board of Selectmen to negotiate and enter into power purchase agreements. So that would be if a solar developer placed a project at the town garage, the selectmen are looking for authorization to agree to that agreement to purchase the energy produced by the solar panels to offset the town garage electricity, and then if excess generation to offset other electricity bills in the town or schools. And then so Article 18, I should note, it is, by the language allows it to the selectmen to enter into power purchase agreements for any potential arrays at the town garage, at the town landfill, or any other potential systems on town-owned land, just in case in the future a project does come up that we're not anticipating at this time, so that they have that authority and would not have to wait to come up to another town meeting to close a potential deal. The last article, Article 19, this is related to tax agreements. So solar projects typically will have a tax agreement to deal with the personal property taxes of the solar equipment. The solar developers look to spread their tax liability over a 20-year lifespan rather than have it all hit right up front in a personal property tax bill. And the selectmen have negotiated with the Kingsbury Club solar developer for the panels and potential canopy that's going at the Kingsbury Club. They have negotiated on 106 Adams Street for a rooftop solar array there, which is just on a commercial building. And then this article would also allow them to enter into tax agreements in case, like we said, that there are future solar projects at the town landfill, the town garage, or elsewhere in the town. Again, that's just looking for the authorization so that a project wouldn't be held up in case there is not a town meeting in the near short-term horizon. So happy to discuss any of them further or take any questions.
Yeah, so that's very, I had questions, and I think Nick is, folks would probably have a better process to ask the questions. I think that just one note was that, at the selectmen meeting on Tuesday, there was some discussion on the preference going forward that we would not own the solar equipment, but that we would, lease the property, is it? Can you kind of clarify that a little bit, Nick, in terms of?
Sure. So
And then we'd buy the energy back. I just kind of walked through that.
the town currently owns two solar installations. One is at the wastewater treatment plant that was built about 6 years ago now. That was financed. It got a lot of grant money to build that. So that is town owned. So the town is accruing all the financial benefit of that solar array. So it's offsetting the wastewater treatment plant's electricity costs. And we're also earning under the old program, SRECs, for the power generated by those solar panels down at the wastewater treatment plant. It's the same story for the public safety. There are panels at the public safety building. Again, those were installed as part of the project at the public safety building. The town owns the installation. Select Energy is contracted by the town to manage the finances of the solar panels for our SREC and maintain and repair any issues at either installation. So those are the two town-owned ones. So the town is accruing all the financial benefit, but put up all the upfront costs. And there is still, for future projects like the town garage, it cost $500,000-ish to install a system. And there's a question as to whether that it would make sense for the town to take on that financial liability rather than allowing a solar developer to come in, bear the upfront costs, and sell the power to the town at a reduced rate, at a reduced committed rate for the 20-year period of the agreement that they typically are. And the other thing on these power purchase agreements, they do allow various buyout clauses. So if the town was interested or got a windfall and wanted to buy out the agreement, that is an option within the contracts.
I can't believe that the solar panels at the wastewater treatment plant are 6 years old. It seems like yesterday. For the ones that are potentially installed on roofs, I know, the town garage is relatively new, so the roof is probably in good shape. But Presumably before we would do other buildings, we'd make sure that the roof structure is in good shape and
Yeah, and on the
doesn't need work for 20 years or so.
Yeah, on the town side, I don't believe there even would be another viable site really. And on the school side, I know some of those roofs are getting closer to needing to be replaced at some point in the next 5 or so years. So I think those might not be ideal candidates until a later point.
Do you have any ballpark idea that the benefits of these installations? You know, what the town will reap and
So I know
potential reductions in energy costs.
So we have not done any real in-depth dives on the landfill. Some proposals were put together, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, that I know were thrown around by the Energy Committee. On the town garage roof, we've had some preliminary work done there. It'd be about a 216 kilowatt installation that generates about 250 kilowatt hours in the first year. I think I'm missing some thousands, but 250,000 kilowatt hours, which would be in excess of the town garage's usage. The town garage is probably around 175,000 kilowatt hours a year. And a couple of proposals that we've received, just kind of, cold calls, as I'm sure you've seen, Jeremy, is around 5 cents a kilowatt hour for a PPA over a 20-year lifespan. So, whether we go to market, those numbers hold up, or maybe they're a little bit better. That's just kind of the ballpark numbers that we've heard. As a reference, the town right now for our supply costs, we pay about 9.75 cents a kilowatt hour. So that gives you an idea just on the supply side what the savings would be.
And there's enough municipal usage to accommodate these installations?
So the town garage would take up a big chunk on the town side. So I think the landfill project might be one where it's not necessarily makes sense for the town to take on purchasing the energy based on the potential size there. So that is one that might be a pure lease, if that's even possible for a solar developer. So it's just a question of some of the town's commitments on its electricity.
Yeah, can you revisit the personal property tax on this equipment? You talked about it being deferred. Someone did.
So usually you'll see a tax agreement for a 20-year lifespan of a installation. So it'll be a payment over 20 years rather than structure these payments up front. The tax law on solar panels has been a little bit convoluted in recent years. So it's an agreement you'll typically see to cover payment of personal property taxes to spread that liability over 20 years.
Why
That
isn't it
specific location, right?
So my question follow on, why isn't it a continuing liability or obligation, personal property tax? You're implying that it's just a one-time charge.
It's usually personal property tax usually has high depreciation very quick. So it's a high upfront cost and the value depreciates very quickly. So even when you're talking about like lab equipment and all that stuff, it's usually a high upfront and the value of that depreciates very quickly over the.
But the town is still taxing, albeit on lower fair market values.
Right.
Or stated values.
Right.
Sorry to cut you off, Bob.
No, not at all. As I said, this number 19 is specifically for the Kingsbury Club, or
So Article 19 would cover the tax agreements that the selectmen have negotiated with the Kingsbury Club for their potential rooftop solar project, as well as their potential parking canopy. And in addition to that, it covers 106 Adam Street, where there's a small rooftop installation. And then there are, potentials. So if we had a private developer come in on town land, there's potential for tax agreements there as well.
All right.
So for example, if we did the town garage project, you'd see the power purchase agreement would generate savings because we pay less for electricity, and then there would be income to the town in terms of a tax agreement that is spread over 20 years.
Does anybody else have any other questions on all these solar ones? I have that we already voted on 16 back in February 22nd, because this was number 16. The landfill one was an article from last year. The other ones we have not discussed and voted yet.
Nick, on
Um,
those tax agreements, oh, just one quick question, Sharon.
Yeah, go for
How
it.
much are those, how much revenue would that bring in, or is it hard to tell right now?
It kind of varies. The proposals that we have for the town garage roof, I think on the tax side was, I believe they're around 35,000 over 20 years, with a declining payment each year. That accumulated at about $20,000, or excuse me, over 20 years was 35,000 total. So that it's not anywhere near negotiated or done, but that was kind of where the, to give a ballpark on where proposals
Okay.
would be.
Okay.
Should I motion one at a time or can we motion all three?
We should probably do one at a time for
Okay.
cleanliness sake.
Oh, I'll share the wealth. Anybody wants to? Motion to approve Article 17 as presented in the warrant.
Second.
All right. Ed,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Kristine,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
I am also a yes. Okay. 17 done. You have another motion, Bob?
No, somebody else. I'm going to share it.
Okay. Who
I'll
wants to
mo- I'll
motion
move-
for?
I'll move to approve Article 18 as presented in the warrant.
Second.
Bob,
Yes.
Christy,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Because who wants to vote against sunshine? You know? Okay. And so now we're on 19. I'm a little punchy today. Sorry. Someone would like to motion on 19 for solar at Kingsbury.
Motion to approve Article 19 as presented in the warrant.
Okay. Is there a
Second.
second? All right. Newton,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Kristine,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Great. Is anybody else noticing that I'm jumping around this time just to keep everyone on my head, not just going in?
Well, in that regard, can I ask a question about former number 17? I guess I missed the action around Economic Vitality Fund. Economic Vitality Fund.
Oh, yeah. So we took that out.
Was that a recent Board of Selectmen
It was
decision?
from the Board of Selectmen pulled it. Yeah.
Yes. Given the stimulus money that is coming in, we will be using that for economic development. And we already have money set aside in that account. It was never meant to be a very large account. So we'll leave the money that's in there now and we'll refund the article.
Thank you.
We'll withdraw it. Just to note, we also withdrew Lot 1 and Lot 3 on Ice House Road.
Yes, I noticed that. Why?
Yes. So when meeting with the selectmen the other day, the concern was the number of warrant articles that we have currently and anything that they felt they didn't need to urgently act on this year, they would like to hold until next year. So they still have authority currently to lease Lot 3 so that if they decide, you know, one of them gets a bee in their bonnet this year and they want to lease it, we can move forward with that. But other than that, we'll hold. We have quite a few projects going on this next year, so we probably would not be able to move forward with that RFP as it stands.
Thank you.
I believe if the numbers or the order anyway hasn't changed dramatically, I think we've already done all the way through 28. Is that
I agree
20?
with that.
So I
Do you
just
agree with that? I think we've done all the.
just want to bring to everybody's attention, Article 20 may also be withdrawn. I believe the Affordable Housing Trust is going to have a discussion about that.
Okay.
So,
Alrighty.
heads up.
Well, we passed it just in
I
case.
know. What I'm really
Oh.
saying is there's a chance these all are going to be renumbered again before you have the warrant hearing. That's really what I'm.
This is why
I'm
my
not saying
spreadsheet
it.
has the numbers in one column and the names in another. I can fix that. I'm not gonna freak out on you like past warrant committee chairs.
He sent me
Okay.
a message the other day about it. He asked how my numbering was going.
He was texting me about it too.
I know.
I want to send, I think I might send him my spreadsheet back and be like, well, see, if you did it this way, it wouldn't bother you. You need to be in Excel, not in Word.
He
Okay.
sees that, his head will explode. Don't do that.
He's not the first chair that it had exploded about numbering. Okay, so 29 is $20,000 for the zoning diagnostic. I guess I'll just start off by repeating what I said last week. I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think we have to do it this year. That's just my opinion. If anyone has a differing opinion, please voice it.
Well, in keeping with the theme of using stimulus money for economic vitality, would it be possible to direct some of those monies to pay for the diagnostic?
So that's one of the things that Nick and I have been talking, whether or not that would be a possibility for the planning board. I believe there's also a grant that they're applying for as well. So I think we ask them to withdraw the article and make a commitment to move forward with the grant and then economic stimulus if possible.
Okay.
So if you
Yeah.
did that and there was no article, they can still do it. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure they can still do it if you ended up pulling the article.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I just want to say I'm not against it. I was just,
You said that at the top, it'll be in the minutes.
okay. I'm not against it. I'm just thinking I like Kristine's idea about funding it elsewhere. Okay. Does anybody else want to talk about it some more? Or do we want to? So I guess, Kristine, if we're saying we want it funded elsewhere, we're making a motion to dismiss then?
I think you're going to make a motion to dismiss. And in the meantime, Kristine, if you want to, or I can reach out and talk to Sarah and the planning board to see if they would withdraw it. And if they'll voluntarily withdraw it, we'll renumber the articles again. And we won't need to put it on the consent calendar. We can just take it off before the warrant hearing.
Sure, I'll give Sarah a call and talk to her
Okay.
about it.
She knows we've been talking about it.
And she knows that we're not talking about it negatively because we
No.
don't like her or anything. Okay.
No.
Yeah,
To
I
be
think
clear.
it's important to have, we just don't have money right now, enough money
Right,
to,
And if we
fund
can
it.
find another way to pay for it, either
Yeah.
grant funded
Yeah.
or the stimulus, I think that's more appropriate than putting on the tax levy this year.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I did pop my head in this morning and just talked to her briefly, and she's totally understanding. At least she was for the moment she spoke to me.
I was gonna say she already has a tiny budget. I don't want her to feel like she's being picked.
No, and I mentioned, I did say to her that everybody is fully supportive of what she's
Mhm.
doing. I know
Bob, you're gonna need
Kristine
an
handles it
assistant.
very well, but I just wanted to let her know that, because I've worked with her before.
I was wondering if Bob has an office in the townhouse.
He would
No,
like
you're gonna
one.
need an assistant to deliver coffee soon.
I'm just trying to learn.
Hey, we love it. We love seeing.
Bob,
people.
you're everyone's favorite visitor. So it's all good.
I'm not going there.
He shows up with coffee. He's keeping the financial team well caffeinated.
There you go. There you go. Okay. So is there a motion in regards to Article 29?
So I'll make a motion to dismiss Article 29.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ed,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Kristine,
Yes,
Bob,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. So 29 is my first article that's going to go red on my spreadsheet. Decided to make it be like a stoplight. No, not using purple, then I'll be shocked. All right. So next is, I think we are not doing the Peak House district, right? We're going to be to be heard on that.
I think you're
'Cause I
gonna.
don't thi- he can
Uh,
come in.
I'll try to have him come in maybe that Monday. Are we gonna meet Monday, the 5th?
We can meet, yeah, we can meet Monday the 5th, yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll see if he can come in Monday, the 5th, and maybe we can vote on it then if we're ready. Kristine, have
good.
you heard anything as this evolves? Or I haven't talked to Michael Taylor in a couple weeks, but
I think
so.
they're waiting to have their public hearing, which I don't think is until mid-April. So
Oh.
you may not, I don't think for purposes of the warrant report, you're gonna be able to vote on it before we send this.
We're
to
probably
them.
just gonna be to be
I think
heard.
to be heard, and then
Yeah,
they'll decide what they want to do in terms of the article.
okay, yeah, because that was one of the things that he had wanted to have a meeting with his committee before,
Mhm.
like, before he actually came to Warrant Committee, so I'll see what he wants to do.
I mean, if their thing is, I mean, what, town meeting's the 17th? We can always,
Yeah,
yeah.
May 16th.
yeah, I mean, so we can always vote on it like at the beginning of May, right before.
Yeah, because even though you will put a note at the beginning of the warrant report that if there are any votes, because the selectmen aren't going to take a position on all these articles until after we probably put this to print. We keep an annual town meeting page updated with all of the actions. So it'll have all of the warrant committee and the board of selectmen recommendations. So if you change your mind on any of these after the warrant report goes to print, on the to be heards, we'll just update the town meeting page.
Okay,
We're fancy like that.
Okay. All right, so 31 and 32 are the citizen petitions. So we'll still be to be heard on that. I talked to Mike Quinlan, and he and Tim Bonafati are going to do a presentation for us on April 12th, if that works for everyone. And then that way, I mean, you can feel free to dive through all of the documents that Bob has pointed out, as well as watch any of their past meetings or the selectmen's meeting. But he's going to do a presentation. I asked for information on the process and the selection and the cost, those kinds of high level things, kind of to go towards Jeremy's point that he felt like the citizens petitions were almost making him need to decide about, the whole project towards this. So if you want to email questions, like Bob, do you want to collect questions and give them to Mike, or do you want me to?
That's fine, but and a couple, go ahead. I was going to make a couple of comments. First of all, I did send you that reference because Ed had asked a question, and it's that the preferred solution, which is the basis document that was presented to the Mass School Building Authority on the Wheelock site, is a very extensive document. It's everything you want to know and didn't want to know is in there. It's thousands of pages, okay, 1,000 pages plus. But I referenced a couple of the pages in that email because it just summarizes the selection of the preferred alternative. And of course, you can reference back to what the alternatives were. And, for
Bob,
example,
do you have what you had sent us? Do you want to just read the pages for the people
yeah, it's pages,
listening so that they can know what pages you referred us to?
yeah, it's pages 201 to 204 is the selection of the preferred alternative. And it goes through a narrative on the site. It goes through the school buildings committee's decision, which is in support of the preferred option. It explains why it's a 4-5 configuration. It explains why the Wheelock site was selected. And then it talks about the new construction. And it also has on page 203 concerns about the Dale Street site. So, I mean, one of the bullets on Monday night, it said no one never explained why not Dale Street. Well, on page 203, it explains the concerns for the Dale. And then on page 204, there is a chart that has Dale Street School versus Wheelock School, pros and cons. And just when you when you go through the document, you'll see that initially, I believe it was 6 or 7 sites that had been evaluated. And I think it's 4 of the sites, it was like Hospital Hill was one, and different locations had been reviewed and brought to the public, one of the public forums. And it was concluded that the only 2 sites that would meet all the criteria or any, a substantial amount of criteria were the current site and the Wheelock site. So that's why there are just 2 that came out, but they started with 6, I think, at least 6.
I think it was 6, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure.
And so it came down to these 2. And so obviously, when you get down to pros and cons, you get judgments, right? And
Judgments.
that's what you'll see, right? But I think that, and I know that Mike's and Tim Bonifati's presentations will probably draw this out. The substantial issue is space. The design of the building in terms of the space available. And I think you'll hear this, but it's just that the Dale Street site doesn't fit the design of the 4-5 school. And you'll see that it's absorbed by the space available. Now, one could argue it will fit a school, but I think you'll see as you go through that that's one of the issues that's brought up. And I would encourage you. There was a meeting last evening of the school building committee, and one of the presentations was for the layout of the campus. And it's a sky view, but it shows where there would be different trails and how they'd make use of the natural environment, and you'd see what parking was, and you could just see from that perspective. And there'll be more on that coming out, but it does show the merits of the size on this. So I again, using this information, there is and you can get a feeling for the MSBA process as well. But I think that, as we consider these articles, or this article in particular, this is not giving a up or down on the Wheelock site. It's just stating that there's no alternative to the vote in November, or excuse me, in September, on the Wheelock site at the town meeting. It's there's just no turning back at this point to approach a Dale Street alternative to Wheelock, and that'll be explained. But at the bottom line, and one of the things that came out on Monday was, this multi-purpose building, which had never been presented before. There was a meeting of the Permanent Building Committee. I think it was first week of, I had a note on it, on March 15th, in which the Park and Rec came and expressed a desire to utilize the Dale Street building that's available for Park and Rec purposes. And that was, presented to the, that's not part of the school building charter or mission to determine what the alternative use for the Dale Street property is. But there had been, some of the pushback was, why are we abandoning Dale Street? And it's important to note that the proposal from the Park and Rec is they want to take over a portion of the building that they can, including the gym and some of the other space, for Park and Rec purposes. And clearly the FAF Center is not adequate, but it's still being used. So using the Dale Street building for park and rec purposes is one alternative, and I think a really viable alternative, and that's why it was discussed by the Permanent Building Committee. And it was noted in that meeting, they requested that Park and Rec make a more formal presentation on it. I attended at least one meeting, one of the open meetings for Park and Rec before the pandemic, and they went over site selection, and it seemed like the really strong desire on the part of the town people who were there was to keep Park and Rec in a central location. They thought that, putting it in McCarthy Park or putting it up at Hospital Hill would be, inconvenient for some and probably unsafe for kids to get back and forth to the Park and Rec. So the Dale Street Fast Center is a desirable space. And a piece on that is that in the Permanent Building Committee, and I'm getting out of outside the scope of it, but in the Permanent Building Committee, there is about $600,000 of funds that are available because of the underspend on the public safety building. And so that money would be available in bringing the Park and Rec over to the space. Okay, so, those are some of the things that need to be considered in the background. I'm happy to speak about it, but they have come up over the course of the meeting. One of the questions that came up in the pages that I referenced, I think it was Amanda and Ed, was it the question of the incremental money that goes to the Wheelock site versus, and it's been discussed. If you see, it's on page 204, when you go back to, no, it's not 204, on 197, when you go back to it, you'll see a reference to including allowances for water main replacement and traffic improvements in the estimated cost. And it's in site demolition, hazmat costs, et cetera. Essentially, you'll see in the Dale Street alternative, the cost is about 5.7 million. And in the Wheelock site, the cost is 9.3. So again, these costs on page 197 are estimates, right? And it's now that the numbers are being finalized in the process and the design, and that's why it was important to get the approval, because you have 90 days, so to June, to get the specific numbers down to go back to MSBA with the actuals. But when you see on page 197, what you'll see are relative cost estimates with like comparisons. But again, to be totally transparent, to the building committee made a conservative estimate on costs because there's a water main connection that needs to be added if the school is built in that site, because they need to expand the pipes. And there was also discussion about whether there would be, as it noted here, traffic improvements. Well, in the meeting last evening, the traffic mitigation issue was addressed. And what it's come down to is a proposal. Now, again, it's all in the discussion stages, but what was proposed at the meeting last evening is 3 stop signs at Elm and South Street, and then a couple of signs that would prohibit entry except for residents to certain streets off of Elm during school hours, which you'll see, anybody who goes down through Dover, there's a sign that says no left-hand turn during school term. You'll see them all. But the point I'm making is that there was a cost built into this in this estimate, saying, well, at one point they said, well, maybe you need to put traffic lights in, or maybe you need to put a roundabout or what have you. It's come down to three stop signs. And that's been come out of public meetings and they continue. But in one of the public forums that talked about traffic, the chief presented what was in attendance, and she discussed it and said, start with the stop sign, see how it works, and move from there. They're going to have crossing guards and things of that nature. So again, they put 3.6 million in to be conservative in addition, but it's an estimate and it's conservative. Now, one of the costs that are not in the Wheelock site is addressing the Dale Street location. So if there will be work, obviously, for some of the, temporary, quote, temporary parts of the Dale Street building that will be taken down. And those costs are not allowable for of MSBA, contribution. So those will be costs. But again, treatment of the Dale Street location is not in the scope of the elementary school, but it will be a town cost. So
And I was just gonna say, to that end, Bob, the portico discussion about the portico on the front of Dale Street that needs repairs that are pretty extensive, that project is on the list for the Municipal Stabilization Fund already.
right.
And so Amy had discussed that in a capital budget meeting a couple back.
Right.
And I think she might have touched on it with us potentially too, because I think no matter what is at Dale Street, that front of the building is the thing that people seem to want to kind of cherish and hold on to with those columns. So that's why that is already set in line inside of the Municipal Stabilization Fund. So the cost to that isn't really a factor in this, I guess is what I'm saying, because
Right.
it
No,
sounds like
absolutely.
the town's going to do it regardless.
That's right. Exactly. I mean, it all goes into the bucket for sure of the town, but not,
But it's
And-
not part of this project, I
exactly.
guess. Yeah.
And the
not part
thing
of this
about it
project.
is, it just, to just draw to page 197, which are comparative costs, preliminary design pricing, the addition / renovation of the Dale Street School was the most expensive option. And, it was called, and the reason that was made is because the Dale Street School is, 1945 design. It just, you almost have to, I think you basically, you can read it because it's in there. It's in the 1,000 pages. They go through the detail, but basically you have to rebuild the building. It just, it's not at all in the model of what the current school
Right.
design is.
And just to build on that for a second, Bob, like and I think part of the reason for that, if I remember from the discussions, is because the standards you have to have an elementary school at are significantly different than if the building was reused for something else like Park and Rec. There are certain levels that you have to hit in a school in that reno than you do if it was a Park and Rec. And so that I know that there are discussions about the fact that if this moves to Wheelock, the town has to then obviously spend on Dale. But I think that if the permanent building committee and Park and Rec are coming forward, because was it 2 years ago that we approved that 150 for the consultant that Park and Rec's been working with? It wasn't last year, so it must have been 2 years ago.
It was the year we did everything. So I want to say 2018.
Okay, yeah, so it's been a while,
We
right?
haven't done much in 20 or 21.
Yeah.
Right. And so
That wouldn't have happened on my watch, just saying.
yeah, so
Blame it
Park
on
and
Mike.
Rec, right, so Park and Rec got that 150 to start to study where they wanted their building at that time. And so I don't think any of us have seen the full report of that, and I don't even think they necessarily have it yet. I think that everything got delayed with the pandemic, but it's a similar study in that they looked at several different places and the different things that you could do. And I guess my point is the train was already moving on Park and Rec, right? So the town already spent the 150, and where and what Park and Rec's going to come at. Now, if the permanent building committee is saying that it looks like their consultant is pointing at Dale Street, if it's available as their option, I have heard that, if you compare building like a brand new Park and Rec up on the sledding hill versus just doing some renovations to Dale Street to make it be Park and Rec, I believe that report is going to show that it actually costs the town less to put Park and Rec inside of a renovated Dale Street than to build something 100% new up on the sledding hill.
Well, I think that would show to be true. And I think the other piece is that it addresses an immediate need in a time when we can't afford to be, spending that kind of money on a Park and Rec building in context. It seemed to me. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I think that, and why I'm saying that in this context is, nobody is abandoning Dale. And I think that Dale offers, I think, it'd be my opinion, but Dale offers opportunities in different contexts. And, one of the things that came out of the call, and again, I'll step back, but in the meeting that was held at the public forum in which the police chief was resident, a question was asked to her about this relative safety of having the Dale Street location versus Wheelock. And her answer specifically was, it will make no difference. She said, if something happens at the Dale Street school, it's not like we come across the street. She said, it's an active, we have active patrol people who are in process, and the response would be no different. And she couldn't speak to the fire department, obviously, but we already have a school at Wheelock, so to say that that's not a safe situation would be a little bit of an issue to me, given that the high school, and the middle school, and the second and third graders are already over there.
Already over there. Yeah.
So again, there's a lot there, but I would encourage you to at least look at those pages. And I think if you look at those pages, I think Ed mentioned, it raises questions. It doesn't answer everything, but it raises questions. Some of the answers are in there, and I'm happy to engage one-on-one. I don't want to.
And also just, I think any question anybody has, I think is probably a question that other of us have, even if we haven't thought of it yet. And it's probably also a question for people in town that are listening probably have too. So I think no matter what, we should put all of those questions together and then provide them in advance to Tim Bonifani and Mike Quinlan and get them to put them in a presentation that can be available and gone through. So like, even if you think of a question next week and you find the answer the week after, I think it's still good to add it to the list so that it's part of the full presentation.
Absolutely. And I would encourage you to, and working with Mike, I think he does a great job. And I've known Tim, working with the school with Tim 20 years ago. So, and so their credibility is, but I think Mike is really intent to, and I want to speak for him, but I know in talking to him, he wants to focus on the facts. He doesn't want to be, addressing, the different other issues that people like to raise in some of these contexts. So he's dealing directly with the facts. And I think starting with this PSI and generating questions out of that, that's the fact sheet. And to understand the facts as they compare. And if there are, questions, as I said, because there are some judgments involved, you can say, well, yeah, okay, it's not that disruptive to have the Dale Street kids go to different locations for a couple of years, so while they're building on their site. I mean, that's a judgment. I don't know, but putting students in different schools for a couple of years may or may not be desirable to the town, but it's there and it's on it's raised as a reason why building at Wheelock, not disruptive to students while they're at Dale Street, was a plus. Not the decision, not the only decider, but a contributor to the decision.
Did you have a question, Newton?
I do. Just so Tim and Mike will be coming on the 12th,
On the 12th, yes.
and their presentation is just to review the site selection.
Whatever we want it to be. I have
In addition to our
specifically
questions.
I specifically asked them to address the process and the site selection and kind of what they went through and the cost. My guess is probably at that point, it'll probably be our only topic that night, just because we're going to have been past trying to do so many of these other ones. So that's why I say anything you want them to talk about, if we can get that information to Mike at least by, let's say, at least by the 5th, so he has a week to add it in. So if you want to shoot those questions to Bob, then he can compile all of them and get them to Mike to make sure that he includes them into whatever you need to know. And if you have some question, I mean, Mike also wrote the bylaw that's in question for Article 32, so he's coming. So if you want him to talk about that too, we could have him do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kristine.
But as it relates to the Article 31, how they want to form that committee to, I guess, reevaluate Dale being at Dale. It seems like like from what I gathered from Monday's meeting, it's like a non-binding, so it doesn't, even if we pass it, they can form a committee, and then I guess approach the committee, the Dale Street Building Committee, but they don't really have to recognize them, right?
I don't think so.
To recognize them.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You're right. It's non-binding. It's almost like a it's like a beauty contest a little bit. It's like, do you like the idea or don't you? And as was presented, who gets the most people at a town meeting? But the impact could be it's two things. It's one is it leads, and Mike and Tim, these are the questions I think that should be asked, is what would be the consequence if the town in September votes not to support the Wheelock School and the financing, because that's the ultimate question. Kristine, you're right.
Yeah, and I asked Mark Sorrell that, because usually, if a town meeting doesn't get approved, it's barred for 2 years. And then Mark basically was saying the MSBA just moves on to another project. So we would just get, at least from what I understood from him, we get overlooked. It would just be.
Well, right. And I think, that's a question you definitely want to ask Tim and
Mike to talk about,
because they'll tell us, as they've told me and he said in meetings, it's not clear. I mean, it's bulky. There have been experiences where towns have gone back and asked for reconsideration and they haven't been moved out. The examples that were used, they looked at different places, and Mike and Tom can talk to it. Tim, can talk to it, but they were not but yeah. So he will explain that, and I think that's really important to ask that question. So
I'll send you that question, Bob.
There you go.
And I think it's also, when you're talking about process, I think it's important to understand the process from now to September, because it's going to be between June and September where our job is going to come in to evaluate costs and to evaluate financing. And that's where, so we're going to make the judgment on the article that's before the special town meeting, similar to what we did in the, with the hospital. So we need to be well informed on the costs. And as I said, right now, they use an estimate of square footage, but now they're going through sides of, how many parking spaces do you need, and what's the size of the gym that's required, and a stage. And so all these things are in play right now, and what's reimbursable and what's not. Again, traffic mitigation versus the water main, all those things will be coming into play between now, June, and then the ultimate special town meeting in the fall. So all questions on the table for sure.
And presumably we'll vote on this article after that presentation. Is that the idea?
Well, what I was thinking is that we would do the presentation on the 12th. We'll probably take the next week off because it's Patriots Day. And then on the 25th, maybe after people have had a chance to sleep on it, like maybe we could vote that week if that ends up working out for people, because you may end up wanting to do more research or reading some things. I don't want people to be put on the spot to vote right after we hear the presentation.
Right.
And at this point, we will have, we're already past the warrant hearing, right? We just have to vote by town meeting. So
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking we would try to do.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that we're not voting on the merits of the Wheelock school. We're just basically, I guess, opining that maybe the process that's been applied to recommend and select the Wheelock site is somehow incomplete, and therefore we should go back and revisit it and live with the risks that might present.
I agree. I agree with what Bob said. I feel like this vote is more about, do we support and think the process was done as it should or not? Because you're basically saying form a committee to go back and look at it again. That's how I see it, versus do you want Dale or Wheelock? But others may see it differently. But
It's processes and fact, yeah, those are the two things that I kind of gleaned, is processes and fact. And I just left thinking, is there another way to validate or kind of reconfirm the facts? Or, I know I left in my mind kind of wanting to make sense of the facts as well. And I don't know that it has to be a revisit, but.
Well, and I think that, Amanda, so if there are specific things in there that you're like, is this true or not, which was the real fact, write those down and send those to Bob, because then you don't have to necessarily just trust what Mike and Tom say, but they can point you to specific resources that are the facts behind that. Because I think that that's what's hard, right? Because you listen to these presentations and there's these bullet points and you're like, oh, that could be true, but is it? I don't know. Show me the backup that makes that be that is the fact. So I think it's more like, don't just ask them a question that they say yes or no to, just be like, prove it to me. And so if the prove it to me is a piece of paper from the MSBA, or if it's a minutes from a meeting, or if it's a document from whomever, then I think, you ask for that piece of paper, because I think everybody should see the piece of paper that proves a bullet point true or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, and we all know this, but it's the difference between why we're on the Warrant Committee and because you have to get into the detail. And that's why I encourage us all to go to that, to the school website. And when we have to understand, we have to do one of two things. We either have to read the process and understand it and corroborate the decision, or trust the people who have followed the process and go with their judgments. And I think, and I think that's kind of what it comes down to. It really is. I mean, the information, but I can tell you from my observations, there was not an item or bullet on any of those pages on Monday that had not been discussed and brought up in a public meeting with the school building committee. So Ed, you would ask, well, why don't you just sit down and go through it? And
Right.
the answer to that question is the answers were provided and were not accepted.
Okay.
And I don't want to make that sound like a harsh statement, but there were more than one occasion where someone said, well, you're not listening. And the answer had been, well, we're listening, but not agreeing. And I think there is a lot of that in this proposal, but I think, and that's fine. I mean, people can agree not to agree to disagree. I think it does fall to us when this proposal comes up to put in our own judgments. And I think the meeting on the 12th will be very helpful in that regard.
There's a question in the Q&A. I'll just read it. It's from Chris McHugh-Potts. It just says, please give Dale the opportunity to provide any and all documentation that backs up statements. We do have it and had planned to provide it, but we ran out of time before Monday night. My answer, Chris, is that you are welcome to do so. If you have more information you want to provide, we clearly haven't voted yet, and you can put together a packet and submit it to the committee. Sounds like we're not going to be voting on it for a month, so I would suggest, as soon as you can would be good. But oh wait, I think there might be another one. Okay, just great, thanks. You're welcome. Always happy to take information. Okay, so that was probably the longest conversation about something that we're not voting on tonight ever.
Okay, I'm going to go on mute then. I'm sorry.
No, you are more than, no, this was good because we needed to have this conversation, obviously. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I appreciated the conversation. Thank you for all that context, Bob and Sharon. That helped.
Same, and for being so plugged into the discussion and that's very helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and I think it's important, and we all agree, at the end of the day, it's, it's just incredibly, as I said before, that the one, if I've learned nothing else on this Warrant Committee other than to admire the work that's done by Kristine and Nick, is the participation in the town and the amount of time and effort by volunteers, up and down in each one of these departments is, to me, I without overstating, I think it's humbling to see. It's really what makes the town what it is, and so I do put a lot of faith in the work that's been done and the skills and knowledge of the people on the committee. They really come up every day and do the best they can. So I'm glad I was helpful. Thank you.
I feel like we had a little group Zoom hug.
So I'm used to these little Zoom emojis that are not showing up on my Zoom right now, like the little clapping hands or the.
Kristine, did you block any of the fun stuff from Zoom?
We need a big heart right now.
Yeah.
That was going to be extra money. We're not putting extra money for emojis.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. So with that being said, I think
Back to business, huh?
I know, back to business. Well, the good news is that Article 33, we already voted on, so we have moved on some time.
So 31 and 2 are being deferred till after our meeting with Tim and Mike.
Yeah, I would say let's project probably whatever the last Monday is in April, which I think is the 25th. Or 26th, whatever that day that is.
And any additional submissions from the other group as well. So
right, yeah, exactly.
Tim, Mike, and submissions from the Dale Street group.
Right, but if anybody wants to target when we're going to potentially vote on that, let's shoot for. I think it's the 26th. And I might be in a banner mood that evening because I have jury duty that day over Zoom.
And you'll probably be sequestered.
And you're right. And I'm really hoping, I can't decide if I want to get picked or not. This is just too weird.
Sharon's on, you can't, he's sequestered.
If I'm sequestered, it'll be pushed out.
Yeah, good luck
All
to them.
Yeah. Okay. So 33 we already did. That was the stormwater bylaw. Okay. 34 is the Affordable Housing Trust, which I think is technically Amanda's now. But I think Amanda might be double zooming, so I don't know if Newton wants to talk about it or not.
So I'm a representative on the Affordable Housing Trust. Amanda, you can cut me off anytime you want. But I do have an excerpt that I'd like to share with the group. It is in our to be published action plan, but it explains the logic behind asking for funding and shares the purposes. I promise I won't take as much time as Bob just used, but it's just a 2-page.
We took 25 minutes up. We're clearly not leaving early, but it's okay. It was all needed, so it's all
It's
good.
gonna be in the minutes.
Yep. So just to put this in context, the Affordable Housing Trust is looking for funding of about $16,000. This represents about a third of the target budget that the trust feels it needs to operate on an annual basis. You may remember that town meeting passed, along with the creating the trust, a bond authorization of $1 million for the trust purposes to invest. We have some really sharp legal minds on the Affordable Housing Trust now, and they came up to, with some concerns about the way that the authorization was established. It presents some constraints on spending that money. That is, it can only be used for qualified purposes, such as development and management of real estate or affordable housing, not so much the planning and decision process that one would need to go through to get to those transactions. So an excerpt from our action plan reads as follows. So at the same time that the trust was established, town meeting also approved a $1 million general obligation bond to capitalize the trust. It was hoped that Medfield's inclusionary zoning bylaws would generate revenue for the trust as it provides for a payment in lieu alternative. However, through 2020, projects requiring direct new town investment in land or other real property and town operation or management have not been identified or pursued, and the inclusionary zoning bylaw revenue has not arisen. It will take a combination of town bond proceeds and other recurring revenue to operate the trust smoothly in the future once the non-recurring funds from the former CDC and a recent dispute settlement are exhausted. CDC remaining funds are about 19,000, and the dispute settlement that came into the trust because it related to affordable housing units up at the hospital project, I forget, something landing, the new development up there that I think the Larkin development has done was about 15,000. So the trust has about 34,000. It's looking for another 16 because of the magic number 50. So this need for another source of revenue is mainly due to substantive legal constraints on the use of town bond proceeds, as I said, so-called qualified uses, but it's also a practical cash flow matter, even with qualified uses due to the infrequency of town bond offerings. Theoretical sources used in other communities, whether by adoption of Community Preservation Act or otherwise, present significant legal or practical and political hurdles here in Medfield, such as a surcharge on the tax rate or a charge on property transactions or a share of proceeds of tax title takings. One approach would be to establish an understanding with the town officials and committees that the trust will seek and the town will entertain, beginning in FY22, a routine annual appropriation from town general revenues so as to maintain not less than agreed balance on hand and available in the trust's account at the beginning of each fiscal year of $50,000. Each year, whatever's been spent down would be restored by appropriation. The understanding would guide planning, but would be subject to appropriation each year and not a binding commitment. In addition to the significant qualified uses of funds identified and approved, the understanding would be that the town would take steps necessary to provide funds if and when needed to be dispersed, whether from timely bond issuances or in anticipation of reimbursement from later issued bonds. For the trust part, it would also pursue ways to fund its own activities from earned revenues or own borrowings secured by its own assets. To date, there are none. Or from any available grants, contributions, or other fundraising. These activities could conceivably involve the making of low interest junior lien loans as to which repayments are recycled. So here's the budget thrust net. The $1 million general obligation bond was approved at the time the trust was established, as I said, which the trust has not needed to utilize but expects to need in the future. No additional third-party revenues expected in the coming years, hence the proposed town appropriation that I'm discussing for $16,000. As of January 1st, 2021, the trust controlled $19,000 transferred from the Community Development Corp, as well as funds from settling the zoning dispute with the developer in 2020. In order to properly fund the trust, the Affordable Housing Trust will request annual replenishment in its operating account in the town budget of up to $50K per year. The board will also request a bond issue in FY21 or 22 to capitalize the trust based on identified bond eligible expenses that are anticipated through approximately 2 years following the bond issues. Availability of funding for projects beyond FY23 will depend upon the amount of funding that remains from the initial fund capitalization and whether the trust receives income from loan repayment, property sales, or other streams. As noted, plan and advocate type activities cannot be bond funded. Development and management units could be, but partnering with private parties is cumbersome. So our anticipated expenses of the plan and advocate variety include professional services for planning, management of fair housing lotteries, monitoring, and other support to advance affordable housing projects and programs, partnership with a private developer or organization seeking to build a group home, and anticipates that gap funding may be required for acquisition or rehabilitation. The Medfield Housing Authority aims to expand rental housing for low-income seniors on a parcel that it owns. It is expected that it will require a minimum of 3 years to permit and assemble funding for the project, which would seek to use low-income housing tax credits. The Affordable Housing Trust funding will likely be needed to supplement funding from other sources, as it has already for legal fees on the failed Rose Bay proposal. Additional housing initiatives as identified in the action plan can enable the town to support the conversion of existing housing into subsidized housing inventory eligible units through acquisition and resale, down payment assistance, rehabilitation loans, and other local initiatives. It's assumed that the Housing Trust may provide funding to support the creation of subsidized housing units, a portion of which may be recaptured and utilized to support additional affordable units. So that's the official statement of the Affordable Housing Trust Action Plan for consideration of the 16K. That's
I
a lot
didn't
of
ever
words.
stop to watch Dan Newton, but that was pretty close.
I'm a slow reader.
That's all right. Does anybody have any opinions either way about the 16K?
So
So
basically,
do they have like $1 million from that last appropriate, but because the way you can use it is so restricted, is that why it's so restrictive that they can't use it for these like administrative planning and technical assistant expenses, that they want their own kind of operating budget almost?
In essence, that's correct, but the bond has not been issued. So the trust does not have $1 million of bond proceeds to work with.
I see.
Newton, if it's a 3-year time frame, I mean, just thinking in the spirit of cost cutting, like, is that necessary this year, or can that be something that's looked to in a subsequent year?
So it's all a function of what's in the pipeline and what's getting acted on. So if a group home project came up and the developer wanted to go into Hinckley North, just saying, there may be need for gap funding that the trust would be would want to be able to offer. Now that might fall more in the bucket of bond proceed usage as opposed to the administrative advocate and develop type funds. But there have been other cases, as I indicated in the Rose Bay situation, where the trust came up with, I believe, $25,000 worth of funds to cover legal fees in support of the project for Medfield Housing Authority.
And Newton, the balance right now is 34. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So I guess my question is for Kristine and Nick then. So if we didn't do the 16 and they have 34, if it came up, so if something happened like Newton just described, and let's say they needed 40 and they only had 34, is that, if we didn't approve this 16, is that something they could come for us for a reserve fund transfer for? Or no?
I think so. I think it would be an unforeseen expense because obviously they, as Newton just said, doesn't know everything that's coming in the pipeline. So if it was, I think it would qualify as a reserve fund transfer.
Because I guess to Amanda's point, like if there's already 34 and we're not positive they need the 50 right away, we could push off the 16 in the interest of being fiscally responsible, but it is just 16 in that we don't always have more than that in the reserve fund. And I just bit myself in the head by saying that. That was really dumb. But I know that was, okay, my desk is not made out of real wood. But anyway, but that could be, see how it goes, maybe. And then maybe then you'll have another year worth of data to see if we need to put more in on a more regular basis, if this needs to eventually become an operating budget, or if it needs to become whatever. Maybe we see how it goes, knowing that we might have options, I guess.
So the idea of the Affordable Housing Trust having some operating funding is appreciated by the full Warrant Committee. And it's just a function of this year with the financial discipline that we want to impose, that given the resources that it has, given the stickiness of projects through the pipeline, that the perspective is that we'll wait and see if the trust actually needs the funds.
I guess, I guess that is kind of what I'm saying. Same kind of reason why the economic vitality got pulled, because they already have money, so they don't necessarily need more right now.
Not that we turn it down.
That seems fair.
Yeah, we're doing the we love you, but
doing some switching my warrant hat for my affordable housing hat.
Yes, Newton, thank you.
So Sharon, you could put that on your spreadsheet to reduce to 350?
Yeah.
Hey, this is why we don't have final budget numbers for you tonight.
Yes.
Okay. See, there you go. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions on that?
The minutes will reflect that I did my best to convince the Warrant Committee so that when Sharon Tatro reads it.
We dutifully listened to your speech. Does someone want to make a motion on, oh my gosh, I've lost the numbers, 34.
34.
Can we make the motion that despite the best efforts of Newton Thompson, we have taken a position to
Do you want to vote dismissal on this? But Newton, I think you have an Affordable Housing Trust meeting coming up to talk about Hinckley North article. Do you want to include that and maybe voluntarily withdraw both of them? So then I can,
Yes, but I'll be encumbered by the, on the 1st, by the warrant hearing.
Right, he won't be there.
But I could relay that to Sarah.
I'll talk to Sarah and Mark Marcucci about it.
Okay.
Perfect.
So should we still vote on it, or are we gonna?
She's asking to withdraw.
Well, I know,
Or
but
vote to dismiss, like we did with
How
the
do you vote to dismiss in case they,
20,000.
in
they-
case they don't
yeah.
agree with us,
Should I abstain?
yes, you should abstain.
Yes.
You should just sit in your corner.
But
Not
you
that
did
any of us
very-
just told you how to vote, but you're
You
on
were
that committee,
compelling.
therefore I'm going to tell you to abstain. How's that?
Very good.
Okay, so would somebody other than Newton like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to withdraw since Newton, you did an excellent job. I make a motion to withdraw Article 34, despite Newton's compelling
All
presentation.
right, okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all right, Jeremy,
Reluctantly, yes.
was that a
It's a
yes?
yes,
Okay,
but
yes.
I would like this to come back.
Okay, Ed,
Yes.
Kristine,
Yes,
Amanda,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Newton.
Abstaining.
There you go. And I will also say yes to withdrawing, right? That's what we were doing. Yes. Okay. All right. So number 35, our Joyous Scenic Road. Have we done this one yet? I don't think we have. My computer fell asleep. Are we ready to do the scenic road or no? I don't think we've talked about it at all.
What does being designated as a scenic road mean? Other than it's scenic. I mean,
I had on here that it was potentially getting withdrawn, but it's still on the list.
no, I don't, yeah, I don't think there was a potential to withdraw this one. The planning board, the conservation commission and the historical commission have all met on this, I believe, and all voted in favor of putting this on there. What it would do is if you have a stone wall within the public right of way, there needs to be a public hearing to remove any shade trees or make any changes to that stone wall is basically the essence of it. And it can trigger some planning board design review, basically.
We're
Have
talking
we
about
had-
the stone
have we
walls that have
gotten any-
existed for hundreds of years, right? So
Have we
it's the stone
gotten
wall.
any input from the people at Elm Street, Plain Farm, Nebo, Millbrook on this?
I believe the planning board, the conservation commission, the historic commission have all had it on their agendas for discussion. I don't know if they've asked any of the individual homeowners about that.
I'd be interested to know what the feedback from these particular neighborhoods are.
We can ask Sarah to give us an update. I think she actually may even have a memo on this already.
I think we're probably okay to be heard on this one, right? We don't have to vote on this one tonight.
Yeah, I just don't like to put kind of things on neighborhoods if we don't know
Oh
what.
yeah, you know, what if somebody
neighbor
who
think.
lives on Nebo wants to come after you, Bob, or not?
I tell you,
Well, that wouldn't be a nice scene, would it?
All right,
I'll ask Sarah to put something together for you.
okay, all right. So we're gonna just be heard on that one. All right, and then we've got the collective bargaining agreements, I think are the next couple.
Yeah, so we have 36, 37, and 38. I did send out the memo of understanding summaries for 36 and 37.
Mhm.
And it worked so well when I asked Nick to cover the solar panels. I'm gonna delegate up to Kristine and maybe she can give us a summary because on these three items.
Sure. So the first one, let me just get what order they're in. The first one is the collective bargaining agreement with the Medfield Police League. This is a 2-year agreement. The first year of the agreement falls under fiscal year 21. The second year of the contract falls under fiscal year 22. So we actually did a 0% cost of living in fiscal year 21. However, we are offering a $1,500 one-time COVID stipend and a $1,500 retro payment in lieu of that cost of living increase. This Article 36 will fund that from existing fiscal year 21 budgets. The fiscal year 22 contract you will see reflected in the personnel plan that I'm updating. And that's normally where we put our contracts, but we were negotiating this contract a year behind. As you know, it ended June 30th of 2020. So we're a little behind on that. Fire is exactly the same article for the same reason. Same thing, a 0% cost of living for fiscal year 21. They're receiving a $1,500 retroactive COVID stipend and a $750 retro payment in lieu of a cost of living increase for fiscal year 21. And in fiscal year 22, which will be reflected in the personnel plan, will be a 2% increase cost of living, which we've maintained consistent with our non-union employees as well.
You know, and I sat through again, in the select persons meeting, or whatever they call themselves these days. And you know, a couple of the items that were brought up here, like on terms of dealing with the dispatchers and some of the step increases, really are actions as explained by the chief to improve on retention and you know, building continuity in the staff. So I thought that was great. And Jeremy, I don't know if you'll have any comments because of with the involvement of the personnel board, or if there's anything on this.
No, I don't have any comments per se. Just a question, what's a super holiday?
So a super holiday is this is why I do these meetings in my office. It is, I believe we've categorized it as Labor Day, 4th of July, Christmas, Thanksgiving. I have to go back and look. I'm sorry. It's Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day, and I think it's either Memorial Day or 4th of July. So that's considered a super holiday. Those 4 or 5 out of the 12 total holidays. Until the last contract, you got paid the same whether you work the holiday or not. You didn't get time and a half to work that holiday. So we've changed that. In the last contract, I'm sorry, 2 contracts ago, you didn't get paid any differential if you worked a holiday, which I actually lobbied for a change because I didn't think that was fair to our employees. The last contract, we said you had to work just the day shift to be eligible for the super holiday pay. And then in this contract, they made a very successful argument as to why some people actually celebrate Christmas at night or celebrate New Year's differently, depending on their other family schedule. So we agreed to do the whole day as a super holiday.
And
So you
is
get
it
paid
time and a half
10
pay?
Yes.
My sister-in-law celebrates Christmas at midnight
Right.
and they
So
stay up all night. Yeah.
it was a
happens.
very convincing argument.
And the
I
COVID
can see.
stipend, that was a one-time payment for FY21?
That is a one-time COVID payment for 21. The selectmen started talking about this back in the early months of COVID. They wanted to do something to acknowledge those employees. And this actually falls under Article 38 for our frontline employees. They wanted to do something to acknowledge the fact that it's hard to believe, but in the early months, I know it's only been a year, we really didn't know how it was transmitted. We didn't have enough PPE, and we expected our DPW inspections, police and fire to continue operating as if there was nothing wrong. And I'm pleased to report that we changed their schedules. We completely upended, particularly in DPW, how we were doing shifts so that we would have COVID cohorts. And we had no grievances, no complaints, at least that made it to me. And everybody was willing to work, and the selectmen really wanted to make sure that we thank those employees for working through that when the rest of us had the opportunity to work from home. So those 3 articles will reflect that.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah. So we're grouping the 3 of those together at the end of the meeting because I believe the moderator and the selectmen would like to acknowledge all of our frontline employees, both those that work for the town and those who reside in the town.
Okay.
Does that in essence provide like a 2% COLA in arrears?
In retro.
$1,500?
It's about a 1.5, but it is not built into their base. It's a one-time payment.
Right.
So it does not count as a cost of living.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
but they get the cash.
Yeah,
It's a cash payment, yes.
Cool. Or does anybody have any other questions on these ones? I know it's almost 9, but if I can talk everybody into staying like an extra 15 minutes to finish a few things, we don't have to meet next Wednesday.
Well, as you
'Cause
promised,
Since we were so long-winded in the middle.
Sharon,
Yeah.
I have a hard stop at 9. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's fine.
Or I
Do
can
we
double
want-
Zoom. I can also double Zoom.
You can also
Angela
double
leaves
Zoom.
the meeting again. Okay.
Well, do we want to vote on these 3?
Yeah, motion to
Propose, Amanda?
approve Article 36 as presented in the draft.
Is there a
Second,
second? Okay, Jeremy,
Yes.
Ed,
yes,
Kristine,
Yes,
Amanda,
yes.
Bob,
Yes,
Newton,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also.
uh,
37?
motion to approve Article 37 as
Mhm.
presented in the draft articles.
Is there a second?
second,
Jeremy? I saw a yes. Okay. Ed,
yes,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes,
I'll come back to you, Jeremy.
Yes.
Okay, Newton,
Yes.
Christine,
yes,
Amanda,
Yes.
and I'm also yes. And 38.
motion to approve Article 38 as presented in the draft articles.
Is there a second?
second,
Okay, Ed,
yes,
Jeremy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes,
Newton,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
and Christine.
yes.
And can we do the prior year bill? Or no? I don't.
You didn't vote.
Oh, she's already yes. I'm a yes. Thank you, Newton.
You can, I don't have the final amounts. It is embarrassingly less than $400. And one is from 2020 and the other one will be from fiscal year 16.
Well, look at that.
Why?
I mean, we can probably be heard if we don't know the number.
Yeah, I'll have it by, I'll have it.
I'm not going to worry.
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry
It's
about
not
great
large.
shakes on that one. So the other thing that we'd wanted to talk about that is money related that would help Kristine and Nick do the budget is the public health nurse. So I would like to start by saying I support a public health nurse, and everything else that comes after this has to do with money. So I believe that we can probably, for a variety of reasons, only fund half of the public health nurse in the budget this year. And because I believe that A, it's probably going to take time to hire someone. B, if we hire someone and we run out of money, I think that we can all probably bet the stimulus could help cover the public health nurse, without a doubt. And if there so happened to be a neighboring town that wanted to help share the cost because they were in the bind, that might happen. Who knows? I just think that they could apply for a grant and do it too. I think that there are other ways to help fund half of this. And so if we put half in the budget this year and do similar to what happened with outreach a couple of years ago, for those of you that were here for that, when we needed to, I think we were increasing the rate of the director or whatever it was. There was a position and we underfunded that position, I think by $20,000 because we were trying to balance the budget with the commitment back to outreach that if they hired the person and they needed that money, that the town would of course make good on that position, and then knowing that in the next fiscal year you have to fund the entire thing because you don't have the other factors in play that made it that we could budget less for in order to balance the budget. So that's my rationale for suggesting that we reduce the public health nurse to 37.5 from 75. But I think that the personnel board hasn't even technically met on the nurse yet, but assuming that they do, or
They're
did
gonna-
they?
They'll meet on Monday. The Board of Health is going to meet with the personnel board at 9 a.m. on Monday. Unbelievably my fault that I did not schedule that with the personnel board. I had my meeting with them 2 weeks ago to cover all of the town meeting stuff. And honestly, we haven't added a position in so long. I completely forgot my own process, which is embarrassing. That also proving I need to write everything down. That they need to meet with the personnel board to approve a new FTE, full-time equivalent personnel, before they go to the Board of Selectmen. So I kind of reversed that process and had them come to you first to talk about it, and it should have gone to the personnel board first. So they're
You're
on track now.
forgiven.
And then they will also be, the Board of Health will be at the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday night to strongly encourage the Board of Selectmen to support the full-time. So I think a recommendation from you to put the 37.5 in the budget and then seek the remainder of the funding will move that forward.
But just to one quick question. I know I don't want to use more time. So what we're saying is we support a full-time nurse, but we recognize that it likely won't require full funding this year, as opposed to
That is
saying
correct.
we're not recommending that it look at a part-time or shared role.
That's correct.
It's also relying on the fact that it won't be approved until annual town meeting and effective until what, July 1st. And it's going to take 6
It's
months.
going to take some time to hire that person, which is another reason, Bob, why it won't cost as much.
Well,
Because there's like
I understand the cost rationale, but I know that we've had conversations on, do we need a full-time person? And
I guess I am,
do.
right. So I don't want to make that decision. I think the personnel board and others should make the decision whether or not it reduces from full-time. I guess I'm just saying that assuming that the town wants full-time, I still don't think that we need to fund 100% of it this year.
So the Warrant Committee is saying you make the decision, but take your time because you only got half of it funded. I mean, we're being a little cheeky. I'm sorry, but
You're being cheeky. It's okay. It's 9:05.
I mean, we are. And that might be okay, but I'm just.
There may be other sources of funds, Bob. If there's a grant, they could fund half of it, or COVID relief or something.
Yeah, I mean,
That's fine. That's good, and I think that's fine. But I think that I'm fine with it, honestly. But I just want to say that if we're saying it's a full-time position, then I think we should fund a full-time position. That's all.
I'm just saying that we could fund it next year because I think we can get away without funding.
I understand. I know. I understand the strategy. Okay.
You're allowed to vote against.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Do you think that the personnel board could come back and say that a full-time person isn't necessary and maybe that like a part-time person would be appropriate?
I have to wait till after the presentation that the Board of Health makes to the personnel board. I can't speak on their behalf. I have not shared any of the presentation from the Board of Health with them yet.
So then if we vote tonight and vote for the third, and if the personnel board comes back at saying like half is, they could have a part-time employee, would be appropriate. Do you think that would put us then would that be funding of like a part-time employee?
I guess it would. If the personnel board came back and said halftime, then we will have funded it fully.
Well, funded it, right.
And then I think at that point, we can look at whether or not it's appropriate to use the stimulus money in the first year, the whole 37.5, and we would allow what you budgeted to close out to free cash at the end of the year. We can look at that.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
Right, it would just be a turn back, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
the best way to approach it at this point.
And just to resurrect the ghost of Tom Marie, he's always cautions about adding full-time people because they come with benefits and so I'm not arguing. I'm just presenting another view.
I hear you, Bob. I
Kristine's
hear Tom in my head too.
Yeah, and to Kristine's question, not asking how would the personnel board act, but is one of their options to say, we hear you and we support a halftime position? Is that one of their
Yeah, I think
One of
they,
their options?
I think they have three options. They can say, no, we don't want to add personnel at this time. We'd like you to consider it, on a contract that's ongoing, but we know we can't have a contract, continue our contract with Walpole Natick VNA. So we would need to find a new contractor. They can say they would like to start with halftime, which they've done on some of our other positions. Or they can say, yes, we agree, we need a full-time public health nurse. So I think there are three options they could choose from.
So is our issue in front of us that we're voting to cut the public health department budget in the salary line by half?
Like, yes, that is
Well,
the,
not the whole salary line by half, just the 75,000 for the public health nurse. I don't want Nancy
Okay.
Benatti to think.
we are reducing that line by
Probably listeners.
37.5.
Yes.
It is probably the better way to say it, because I don't think we want to say what the number would be, because it doesn't,
Right.
I don't know if they get affected by the COLA or anything like that, the numbers that you're doing. I
Yeah.
think we would just say that we're voting to reduce it by 37.5,
Correct. Yes. With the
assuming that if
understanding-
a full-time public health nurse gets hired, there will be other ways to
Sure.
help fund
Correct.
it. I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Pending.
And I apologize. I apologize for having that come before you before it had gone to the personnel board and the board of selectmen. I apologize for putting you in that position.
So if
We can vote on forgiving you later.
If we reduce it to 37.5 as that was proposed, do we say pending the action of the personnel board?
No, because I think no matter, I think no matter what, you need to have the 37.5 in there, because even if I have to seek if they say no employee and we need to seek a contract, I'm going to need that money in there.
You need it for the contract person.
Right.
But do we need to vote tonight on that? Can't we wait for the personnel board?
You can wait. What we'll do is, because we're going to start to put together this line item budget for you, is we can prepare it both ways if you'd like. It'll just impact what you're balancing the budget with free cash / stimulus money.
Yeah, Sharon, I defer to you on how you want to
I
proceed.
mean, that's fine. I mean, because I think that so we don't have anything else necessary to vote on tonight except for your minutes and reserve fund transfer. So if we think that we should vote on this before the hearing, then we'll just start the meeting about a half an hour early on Thursday, and we'll skip Wednesday, because if we think we're, for the most part, good on the other monetary discussions and it's just formalizing the vote, probably a half an hour is enough time. If
My question might,
are
again,
good with
I
that.
keep on dragging this out, I'm sorry, but is it better to vote for the 37.5 and that gives some direction on where we are to the selectmen when they meet on Tuesday and hear the presentation? Or does that make any?
I think so.
I agree with you, Bob.
I mean, I think we take a position and then the selectmen has some guidance from us.
No, we could always vote, and if the selectmen push back and the personnel board push back, then we re-vote,
Sure.
because
I would
circumstances
be in
change.
favor of taking a position and just giving some guidance to the selectmen, that's all.
I'm okay with that. Are you okay with that, Newton? We don't all have to vote yes. I'm just saying, do we want to vote? You're more than welcome
Should
to
I
abstain
recuse
or no.
myself?
What'd you say?
Should I recuse myself?
Yes.
You are allowed to recuse
You have
yourself
to
too.
I would recuse yourself because your significant other is a member of the Board of Health.
The Board of Health. So I think you are more than welcome to abstain. Again,
Dodged another one tonight.
it's because you are right in the center there. Is everybody else okay with it taking a vote with the rest of us?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. So is there a motion? Or I guess I can move.
Yeah, you could,
Um,
you could
Okay,
articulate.
I'll do. Okay, I move to reduce is it the public health line or the Board of Health line?
Public health, I think.
Is it the public? I move to reduce the line item in the budget that includes a new public health nurse to 37.5 in hopes that any additional funds potentially needed for that would be found elsewhere.
Second,
Second.
Okay. Jeremy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Kristine,
Yes,
Ed,
Yes.
Newton,
Abstain.
and I am Sharon, and I also vote yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a request for a transfer from the reserve fund for $12,975. Right? I'm trying to read this. For lots of various election-related expenses due to extra expensive pandemic voting.
Well, pandemic voting, and also, if you remember, we talked about this last year, actually probably maybe last February, when our elected town clerk, Carol Mayer, resigned. We had to fill the position with an interim town clerk. So we've had to bear that expense this year, which was not fully incorporated, plus all the other costs. We don't have our reimbursements yet from CARES and FEMA. So we need to pay the bills that we have currently. And then if we do get money that will go back to this budget, we will obviously replenish the reserve fund.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? All right, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the request for transfer from the reserve fund as presented and dated 3/25/2021.
All right, is
Second.
there, okay. Ed?
Yes.
Oh, wait, Kristine, did you want us to do something else?
No, I just want to tell you that this might have been the highlight of Nick's day when he realized that we still do reserve fund transfers on triplicate forms.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, do I have to swing by and sign the real one?
Horrible. He asked me what it was called.
Okay. I didn't know if a scan was going to be allowed back. Okay. We're going to continue on the vote. Ed?
Yes.
Kristine?
yes,
Newton?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. Okay. And so it's actually a serious question. Do you want me to stop by and sign the one that's in triplicate on Nick's desk to make his day?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do that. All right. And I think we just have Newton's minutes left.
Motion to approve March 22nd, 2021 minutes as submitted.
Is there a second? All
second,
right.
You guys are speed readers.
I know. Well, listen, you're such a good writer, and it's a wonderful format. Ed,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Kristine,
yes,
Newton,
Yes.
and Jeremy. I think Jeremy's. Do you want to vote on the minutes, Jeremy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
And I also vote yes. And I'm just taking a really quick look at the list that we had that we were going to cover, and I think we got it all. Do you think so, Kristine? All right. So, Bob, would you like to make your favorite
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Is there a
Second.
second? All right. Jeremy,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
Kristine,
yes.
and me. I'm out. So I think it's wonderful. We only went over 15 minutes when we had a 45-minute, very exciting conversation on the elementary school, which I think was much needed. So
Thank you.
everyone
I second
enjoy
that.
your
Your
night.
indulgences.
Enjoy your night, and see you next Thursday. We're going to take Wednesday off.
All right.
well.
Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Happy
Good.
voting
Yeah.
day. Happy
All right.
election day.
All right. Bye.
Aye.